Okay, we're recording. How are you today?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, I'm pretty busy at the moment, so it's quite nice to take the morning to talk about music.
What's what's been happening?
Well, I've handed the album in, which is exciting. So kind of in the process of working out how it's going to be released, choosing the singles. Yeah, really exciting time, to be fair.
Oh, nice. Tell me about how you found the kind of 18 months to 2 years of the world stopping turning in the way that it had been turning, and tell me how that affected you. Well, tell me how it affected you personally, and tell me how it affected you creatively.
Yeah, it was pretty tough. I was one of the unlucky ones where my second album came out the first week of lockdown.
Oh, fuck.
So everyone kind of went into panic mode, and ultimately I don't think I'm ever going to be able to tour that album because now we're moving on into the next.
Sure.
And all press was cancelled. I mean, we tried to do certain things with Zoom and small performances, but it's not the same energy as coming out all guns blazing with an album. So that was quite difficult. I think I hit like a crossroads and was like, either I'm going to wallow and let this affect me,
Yeah.
or I pick myself up and I just continue. And to be fair, that was the moment when I decided that I wanted to start and pursue my interest in writing for the people,
Yeah.
um, so that I wasn't overly consumed with the possibility of my career as an artist being taken away.
Yeah.
And now, gradually, obviously, the third album's finished and everything's opening up, and I'm sure I'll definitely get to tour this next album. But I've also got a career as a writer running alongside it. So that's something positive to have come out of it. And that definitely saved my mental health.
Without being sort of too negative on it, but we're just touching on what you just said then about, I wanted to start writing for other people, just, in case my career doesn't, potentially go where you want it to go. And obviously, we all hope it does. But do you feel that, because obviously the music industry is such a competitive industry, and do you feel that the pressure of like, got to keep my foot on the gas here because it could stop at any given point? Is that something that you think sort of young artists always feel in this current sort of climate of music? So, I mean, obviously you've
Yeah.
touched on the fact that you then looked into, spinning the other plate of writing for other people. That, I mean, that's a smart move, surely, to have that in the back pocket. But just talk to me about the pressure of being a young artist in today's climate.
It's hard because I think there needs to be, you need like a good dose of drive and like a fire in your belly to keep going, because it is very tough, especially if you're a young artist and you sign to a major, because there's lots of pressures coming from every angle. So it's a balance between that and then also being true to what you want and what you need. And um, I think I was quite lucky in the sense that, like, because I was with an independent label, I had a lot of freedom. And so I was equally pushing myself as much as they were pushing me, and it was all
Sure.
everything that I enjoyed. Um, but yeah, touching on the writing thing, that was always, writing was always the core of me. Whereas when I write for other artists, some of them, it's like performance is the core of them, or it's all to do with like, it's very like multifaceted.
Sure.
Um, so I kind of felt like it was something I was going to eventually go into anyway, and this was
Yeah.
just kind of a kick up the arse.
Well, we'll get back onto that in a moment, but let's start your playlist, and I'm going to ask you, please, for track one, to tell me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please.
Definitely The Less I Know, the Better by Tame Impala. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the episode of Alan Partridge where he plays the invisible bass? And he plays it in that sort of 80s style, like right up high, and he's just dancing around a caravan playing an invisible bass. I'm sure Tame Impala nicked that bass line from that.
That's so funny.
It's the most ridiculous thing, and I played it again today, and I was like, I'm telling you, that's that Partridge bass line. Like,
That's jokes.
100% not.
Like, that's funny because I was playing the guitar the other day and I was like, down, now, 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 now. I was like, that's Phoenix Science. I was like,
Yeah,
what? Yeah.
they must watch a lot of comedy.
Yeah.
But in regards to intros,
Yeah.
And being a young artist, uh, I'm gonna say this thing that I say every single time on this podcast, which is the fact that I've never, ever, ever framed this question correctly. Um, but bear with me. In a roundabout way, I'm going to get there. When you're, and I want to even make it even more difficult for you, because I want you to answer it as an independent artist for yourself and as a songwriter for other artists. When you're writing, are there considerations to how people consume their music now, insofar as, well, that bang goes straight in, it like grabs you straight away. That's going to get me on a Spotify playlist. That's gonna, that's gonna work with an attention span of a younger audience that, and I've gauged this on watching my children and their rapid thumbs just whizzing through like whatever they get. And they want it quick, and they don't want a lot of it unless it really holds their attention. So there's obviously the traditional singer-songwriter, verse, chorus, middle eight, etc., etc. And then there's also the trends in music and the science behind them trends. I'm not when I talk about them trends in songwriting, in pop and things like that. I don't value that. And I'm not trying to say that that's any less or more than some 9-minute shoegaze epic from My Bloody Valentine. There's a science to all of it. So in a roundabout way, I hope you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
Oh, wicked. Does it filter into your creative process?
Yes, and because I try not to let it affect the writing stage, but it definitely affects the production. And obviously the writing and production kind of goes hand in hand as you move through the day. And, usually these songs are initially written, you have the first demo written between 12 and 8 p.m. And obviously, I remember when I first started music, when I was like 16, it was like, it's like 3 to 3.5 minutes on the radio. And now it's like 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you're making, like, say if I'm writing for like a proper, like, hardcore pop out artist, like as soon as we get to like 2 minutes, we're like, how can we wrap this up? Which is nuts. So there's a big pressure in that sense. I don't think that it's helpful to think about the production choices needed for a song to make sense commercially at the moment in the writing phase. I don't think it's helpful. I try and write the entire song before I go back and make decisions as to like whether the intro should be like straight in, or like whether we should have beats from the start, or whether we need like it's time for a middle eight. It's obviously like there's a formula that's very easy to go back to.
Yeah. And
obviously if you're trying to slightly change the system, to go against the formula is the way to go. But often, if an A&R is listening to like a load of tunes, if yours stands out too much, then it's not going to get listened to and taken up. So it's like this balance between wanting to push the boundaries and make really interesting original music, whilst also trying to play the game of the gatekeepers and squid yourself in and slowly change the direction, almost like behind their backs. So
okay. All right, well, I'm going to take you back for track 2, and I'm going to ask you please to tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Yeah, that was Blue by Joni Mitchell.
Cool, yeah, that'd do it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and my mum showed it me actually, and I have a tattoo in San Francisco. I've got blue behind my ears, like blue songs I like tattoos. I was 18, so classic.
Tell me about your kind of emotional attachment to that song.
I think because the way that I write, and also like the poetry and the books that I'm interested in, is that it's like uses like a lot of very like visual metaphors. And the opening line of like blue songs are like tattoos just hit me in a very specific way, about obviously like permanence. And it's something that I've kind of always carried through, like blue as a color and as like this idea of like an emotion and a feeling, and the attachment to water has been the center of a lot of my work. Sums it up.
And to pinpoint the emotion you get when you hear that song, What would you say that emotion is?
It's quite melancholic. It reminds me of my mum, but it also reminds me of how intensely I felt emotions when I was a teenager when I first heard that song. Yeah.
Where was you as a teenager? Where was growing up?
Like North Liverpool, in Southport, which is like a little seaside town.
How was that? Nice place to grow up?
Beautiful place to grow up. Very kind of like, it's very safe, you know. I was a bit of a had like a bit of a double life, so I would sneak off into town as a teenager and go clubbing and help run club nights. So I think my parents thought I had a certain kind of upbringing, and then realized later down the line that I actually had this like secondary life, which had like a very heavy attachment to electronic music,
Yeah.
and a bit of a rebellious streak.
Why do you think? Why do you think you had that kind of desire to rebel as a young lady?
I think I was like a very creative person who didn't do anything creative. I was like, did a lot of like academic stuff, a lot of sport. And I think ultimately had never been given the space to breathe, and whether that's like paint or write my own music and stuff like that. Kind of like let my guard down a bit. So I guess when you're so busy doing other things, you create other more dangerous avenues to let off some steam and be creative.
Yeah.
But now it's like obviously it's something I do like 7 days a week.
Of course. Was it a musical household growing up?
Not really. I guess like because my dad lived in Leeds for quite a bit, so a lot of time at the weekends revolved around like driving in the car to Leeds from like North Liverpool, and me and my dad would always listen to songs in the car and albums, and I guess me and him have like a big connection. Like for example, like we always used to listen to Falls together. We always used to listen to Joy Division. He was a teenager in the 80s, so it's like a hardcore Smiths fan. So he kind of gave me this like very specific kind of Northwest,
Yeah.
yeah, indie upbringing.
That's good though. I mean,
Yeah.
the thought of being able to. Do you know what? It's really weird. Like, I realise how old I am sometimes when guests talk about their parents, and I was just thinking, God, it'd be really cool if like my dad was like that. And I was just thinking, do you know what? I'm actually that dad to my kids. Like,
Yeah.
I am that age now, and it's like, oh God, yeah. I had it's really weird because I've never sort of tried to push my music on my kids, and at all. I just think find your music your own way, and and if they need to rebel or whatever, then I'm sure that's gonna happen. But they listen to lots of electronic music and lots of the kind of R&B stuff that's floating about at the moment. But the other day, my youngest went to me, do you know what, Dad? I think I like this charming man more than there is a light that never goes out, mate.
That's so funny.
Mate, it destroyed me. I was just like, oh, it's all going to be all right. She's found the Smiths. Like, at 16, she's found the Smiths. Perfect. Everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
There's a specific thing. My dad was like, I must have been like 18, and he was like, when I was your age, he was like, he put Well I Wonder on his vinyl player in uni in Newcastle, like just at the exact same age, like when he was like going through a breakup. I think when he first like broke up with my mum or something before they got back together. And I was like going through a breakup at the same time, and there was just like I just felt a connection with him.
Yeah.
Like a very deep connection that I was like, oh, you're actually really similar to me. And all this time I'd thought like, oh, my dad, like he's not cool or whatever. And actually, yeah, we do have that bond.
Oh, that's lovely. That's so cool. Okay, right. Let's stay in the formative years. Tell me, please, the song that reminds you of your time at school.
Big Falls fan, like early Falls. So I'm going to say Spanish Sahara because I remember I went to my first festival at 16, which was Leeds Festival. Or was I 15? I think I was 15. And Falls were on the main stage, and Spanish Sahara has this huge intro. And the payoff when they eventually got into the slamming chorus was just like this euphoric feeling. And it was my first time being in front of such a big sound system. And around that time I'd started like making like a lot of like ambient electronic music, and it was a proper like indie scene at the time. Lots of like, I guess electronic was slowly going into the charts as well. So it feels like quite that transition from the indie world to the electronic world.
But I think at that point as well, there was lots of remixes, wasn't there? Like
Yeah.
especially bands like your Alex Metrics and people like that were remixing like so many of these kind of, you know, Sebastian and Ed Banger, all that stuff was remixing all the big indie bangers then as well. Like Foles had some absolutely cracking remixes.
That's funny. I'm working with Alex Metric at the moment.
Oh really? Oh,
this afternoon.
He come on 2 weeks ago. Tell him I said hello. He was super fun, and I had Foles on last week, so that's quite weird. But yeah, like we'll talk about. Tell me a little bit about school and how you found I guess how you found it.
I loved school. I was a proper nerd and captain of like school sports teams, big thespian. I guess I'm just like a massive extrovert, so I love people. So
did you always like attention?
I think so. It's funny because now like it was almost like, oh, you got everything you wanted. This is like the first album and I'm there on a stage. And it actually was the opposite. And I had to take some time out because it was I actually realized that I'm only happy with the attention being on me if it's on my terms, and I feel safe and in control. And I think I definitely didn't on those first few tours when I got into the music industry, and it was like, you know, lots of attention and pressure, and I just didn't really know how to deal with it.
You felt that was sort of put upon you rather than by choice?
Well, it's a mixture because you don't want to waste an opportunity, but at the same time, it takes years to become a good performer. And like my first show was like Glastonbury. Like I was just expected to be the best new thing. And I obviously wasn't, because it takes years to become a good performer and a good at talking to the crowd and feel comfortable in your own body. Even as like an 18-year-old compared to now as a 25-year-old, it's taken me years to look in the mirror and be like, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of pressures coming from all angles. So.
You mentioned that you didn't have you know, part of maybe the drive to rebel was the fact that you didn't really have a creative outlet at that point. What sort of, tell me when sort of, was music ever something that was happening at school? Was there options to be sort of creative at school?
I think what it was is like, I remember going into music class in year 7 and we had a section on composition. And she gave me like a GCSE grade for composition. She was like, this is beyond like year 7. This is like, you know, and I was like, oh, maybe this is something I'm good at.
Yeah.
And I played a lot of instruments. Like I had piano lessons, drum lessons, guitar lessons. I also played the oboe. But nothing was to do with like composition and creativity. It was very like rigored and controlled. Like had to go to my lessons, then had to go to orchestra, and eventually I just stopped practicing, stopped doing the pieces, and started transitioning to writing my own stuff because I was like, oh, stuff this. Like I hate being told what to do. I'm being told in every single aspect of my life, you know. And I was a good student, so like I would never not do my homework and stuff. So. I think eventually I just cracked. And that was when I started making music, like in 6th form. And I joined like an ambient drone band and started like producing and doing vocals for them. And this was all like on GarageBand.
Yeah.
And then, just set up my own SoundCloud and put up the first EP that I made, all on GarageBand.
So at school, was music something that, was there a backup plan as a career, or was it always like, I want to do something within music?
I don't think I ever saw a career in music. I never saw, I didn't necessarily see myself as like a pop singer.
Why do you think that was?
the other girls. I think I'd put this pressure that you had to look a certain way and act a certain way. And I was like, as much as I was like popular, I was still like a big nerd and quite just a bit goofy, you know, and a bit of a tomboy. I mean, now like I look at people like obviously like Wolf Alice and Let's Eat Grandma, and I see the kind of girls in Robin, and I'm like, that's exactly what I'd want to be. But like at the time, it was like I thought Florence and the Machine was like some angel goddess, and I was like, you know, the only examples, and I didn't have a big enough soul voice to be someone like Adele. And then ultimately I found my passion in like producing initially. So like I got deep into like ambient electronic music, and then kind of came out of that. And now I don't really produce for other people. I co-produce for my own work, but like writing is the center of it. And I've almost gone like more pop.
Sure.
So yeah.
I'm going to ask you now to tell me the first thing you're buying from a record shop, please.
Well, yeah, because I put the first vinyl and the first CD because they were quite like specific moments. Yeah, the first vinyl was XX by the XX, and I think that was a bit later because I got a vinyl player a bit after. I think I must have been 13, 14. That was a big moment. I thought that was such a beautiful piece of work. It's funny because I then went on to make my first record with Roddy McDonald, who produced that album, in the same room that they made that record. So that was a bit surreal. But that was the perfect example of like, I guess like like minimalism, like pop writing, like, and like a minimal aesthetic. I say aesthetic, it's all obviously audio. I thought it was beautiful from start to finish. It's like a concept record.
That's wonderful.
I still go back to it. It was very special and almost like naive in its creation. And I think that's why it's so beautiful, because it's like an untouched band, you know?
Yeah.
In their late teens, early 20s. And then the first CD that I bought was Made of Bricks by Kate Nash, which then resulted in the first gig I ever went to, which was the Made of Bricks tour in Manchester. And I was 13 and both my parents took me.
How was that?
It was overwhelming. I thought she was so punk. I thought she was so cool. I think, maybe that was an example of someone who I'm like I looked up to as an artist at that time. But then, you know, everyone around me was like, I guess when you're an academic, it's like, oh, you need to be a doctor, or like you need to do something else. So no one would ever throw like a creative job in the ring.
What about your folks? What were they suggesting you do? Were they the academic route, or were they, you know? Yeah.
This is why it's quite hard, because it wasn't until like there was record deals on the table really that I decided not to go to uni. And
wow, it got to that point.
Yeah, because I'd worked my entire life to go to like a top uni and study, and I really valued that because and it's funny because I've actually just done a year of university.
Yeah.
Like now I know that actually goes alongside creativity. It's not something that I have to choose.
Sure.
It's something, you know, being tested intellectually and tested creativity creates like a happy holly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, making decisions like that, and like you say, your first show being at Glastonbury and recording your first record, you know, with the producer in the studio, the XX had made their debut record. Like, tell me about confidence.
Yeah. It's something that's now real, but before I used to fake it. I felt, I mean, they talk about, especially a lot of women having like imposter syndrome, but I think just any new artist on the scene who gets hyped, it takes years to understand who you are as an artist, and you need the space. Luckily, I've had the space to work it out, and I'm still here 3 records in and multiple EPs in. But it's hard. It's hard work putting on a face when you don't know if this is your, you know that you could get dropped after the album, but at the same time you couldn't have done any better, but at the same time you don't know if that's your sound because you've not written enough to work it out. It's a very confusing time.
But you can only do your best, right?
Exactly, which is why I don't go back and like beat myself up. And I don't think any artist should look at previous work and be like, oh, could have done this differently, because you do the best you can at the time.
But do you think imposter syndrome ever goes away?
I think there's like a healthy dose of it. I
Yeah,
definitely had like an unhealthy balance when I was younger. Whereas now I kind of, there's an element of like fake it till you make it, of like self-belief. You know, it's like I might not be there, but I believe that I will be there. And that kind
yeah.
of drives everything.
Okay, let's uh, let's take you clubbing. Tell me a song that soundtrack your years in clubbing in Clubland, please.
Club Lounge. This is funny because there's actually a video of me somewhere on someone's shoulders. But I remember Joy Orbison and Bodica were DJing at I think it was Wax. There was all these amazing club nights that were put on in Liverpool in like off Greenland Street. And it's funny because now half of them are like flats and stuff. And Bodica and Joy Orbison were doing the New Year's Eve slot, and at midnight they dropped Mercy VIP, and it was the most, especially as like a young raver, I guess, just like life-changing moment. And it's such a minimal track, and I've always tended to go for either like ambient or quite like minimal techno nights,
Yeah,
especially at that time when I was like pretty hardcore into it and
yeah.
wanted to impress everyone. So yeah, that just summed up the best night of my life.
It's a cracker of a tune as well.
Yeah.
Just touching on confidence, I want to sort of spin it a little bit and look at the sort of flip side of that. Tell me about you and your relationship with a word that's popped up a few times already on this episode, drive.
My relationship with drive. Um, I think I wake up every day, right? And often, because I do struggle with my mental health a lot, as do a lot of creative people and just a lot of people. And like, I know that a hard day's work in the studio, I always feel better in the end. So there's like the short-term drive, which is like getting myself through the day. And then there's like the long-term goals, which I've had praise for the first time in my life in the past few years, and I've realized that I also need that off my team in order to, not in a way that's like I get my entire, you know, I base myself on their praise, but them telling me that like this has potential, or this is your best song yet, or this is something like you're on the right path, you know, has really completely changed my mindset. And I think I had been starved of that for quite a few years.
What encouragement?
Yeah, I think it's very easy with young artists to give like tough love because people assume that it's like the me show all the time.
Yeah,
But I think often they just need someone who they trust to just say that, hey, look, you're doing your best and it's pretty decent.
yeah,
Like, and you know, I I have a completely new team now. I'm with
yeah.
with new publishing. I have a new label, and we always check in and we talk about the strengths and weaknesses of like the campaign and the songs, and we're very open about it. But yeah,
And
always give out praise where due. I think.
and you were talking about that, and I imagine that's referring to the sort of latter part of your answer, which was like the more long term sort of goals and maintaining you know a good sense of well-being. But you also mentioned that you've got like just to get through the day. Talk to me about kind of how you sort of manage your headspace, you know, getting through the day. What's an average day to kind of sort of keep you balanced and where you want to be?
Um, I need a lot of sleep, so I'll sleep into like 8 or 9, and then I'll go for about an hour's walk, just on the marshes, which is, I live in Upper Clapton, so I'm right by the Hackney Marshes with my dog. And then so I
Do
have
you
quite
listen
an
to
easy
music?
time,
Do you listen to
constantly.
when you're walking?
Yeah,
Yeah,
always. Oh, I never stop listening. I have to make a decision whether I'm going to like listen to the new music Friday for that week to try and keep an eye on what's coming out, or I'll pick one of my favorite albums and just smash that.
Yeah.
Or if I'm on the marshes, I'm usually listening to like Bibio or something quite like
Yeah.
mystical, because it makes me feel like I'm in like Middle Earth or something. Yeah, so always have an easy morning, make myself a really nice packed lunch, and then it's game on in the studio. Like I usually work from like, I try and work between 12 and 6, and I work very fast and very intensely. And I guess like anyone who's worked with me or had a session with me knows what I mean by that. But like I literally come in and the song's written in the hour. It's like my attention span is very short. I have to work very intensely for short periods of time. And then yeah, I'll come back another day and finish the production often. But yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. I can't sit down in the studio. I have so much energy.
I'm going to take you home for track 6. I'm going to ask you to tell me a favourite song from an artist from your home county, please.
Oh, I love Clean Cut Kid. I love like the hometown bands. The North produces some epic bands, indie bands. I also like how we're slowly moving back into the indie scene. You can tell that I'm like still reminiscing, like the end of the noughties and the start of the teens with the indie scenes. But I just think Emily is a fantastic song by Clean Cut Kid.
Yeah.
It's got a great hook. I love that indie pop crossover, and that whole the Clean Cut Kid crew have just been so nice to me since the start. I think everyone like from the hometown, like we've always like kept in touch and stuff. So I'm excited to at some point play a festival like on the same lineup so we can have some beers.
In regards to sort of artists from your home sort of county and things like that, would you say there's a sort of healthy? I'm just looking back on from my perspective of when I was doing bands and stuff like that way back. There was lots of bands coming from the area that I was from, and we was all sort of doing all right and breaking through and so on, so signing little deals and stuff, and it was great that we felt there was a little scene growing and we were all mates doing this together. But there was also an element of competitiveness. Like, did you ever feel that? Whether it be you, or did you ever feel that being you was
Not
being
within
judged for that?
Liverpool's a very proud city.
Yeah.
Everyone supports each other. The problem I had was when in that summer when I was 17, I moved to London. And I did feel like it took a long time for them to almost like welcome me back to the city. And the thing is, there's often like a limit to opportunity in outside of London, and it's a shame that it's a very London centric business, but it is. And I didn't want to waste this opportunity, so I just did everything I can, and I felt quite sad that I felt like my home city was penalizing me for it, almost a bit like, oh, so you think we're not good enough? And it's like, no. And it's I think quite a few artists who are from there who have left have said that like they've made them feel like that. Often a lot of journalists, and when you come back there's always like a sarcastic little comment, but it seems to have gone full circle, and now I've come back and I've curated some lineups at like Sound City, and I played a show there for Liverpool Against Racism, and I'm slowly getting back in with almost like a new crew who are running the city, and it feels a lot more welcoming, and yeah, and I want to improve the relationships between London and Liverpool. That's my goal.
Yeah. It was why I set out to do this podcast. The name Off the Beaten Track. It was initially when I set it up was to talk about that pressure from wherever you are to in the music industry to go to London, and it's like it feels like you have to kind of go to London to make it happen, and it purely come about from a conversation. My friend who lives just up the road, a musician former musician called Scroobius Pip. And I like he'd say to me all the time, like, the amount of people that are just when you move into London, it's like, I don't want to move to fucking London. Like, I'm all right in Essex.
Very expensive.
And yeah, and it's like, well, how can you do that? And it was so weird because at the time that Pip was coming through, there was lots of bands from my from my county, like Get Cape Fly and the Horrors, and they were all, a lot of them were relocating to London.
Yeah.
And I just was always intrigued as to why Pip was like, well, no, I don't want to. Like, I can quite happily jump on a train for an hour. It's no great shakes. And And yeah, and that was something. And then hearing you say that you know that you go to London to try and develop your career to another level, and you almost kind of get judged on it a little bit by your hometown, and I find that really strange, and a bit fickle, but I guess that was all of the reasons why I initially sort of had this for the concept of the podcast, because ultimately, if you want to pursue a career in anything, you
Mm.
you will always gravitate towards where the opportunity is, and I don't think that means that you have any less love for where you're from. And yeah, I find it really strange that
You do your best. Do you know what I mean?
of course, and you do your best in one of the most
Yeah.
fucking difficult industries there
Yeah.
is. Do you know what I mean? It's stacked against you from the off. Like, seek out them opportunities, and if that means you've got to jump on a train and move like 3 hours down the road, you're not turning your back on home. Do you know what I mean? You're just trying to do the best that you can with the time that you got to do
Yeah.
the things you want to do. Yeah, crazy, crazy, crazy. Anyway, we talked about trends and the way that people get their music and such at the beginning of this podcast,
Mm.
and this old man's going to throw a bit of terminology that my kids would shudder at. Now, if I was to say it, but I'm going to let you be an influencer for this one, and tell me a song that you think many people may not know that you would like them to hear, please.
Oh, this amazing band called Chartreuse that I actually saw a few months ago at O'Meara. And it's I don't know how to describe it. It's like a cross between like indie alternative, but also like a bit of math rock. But then it could be like a bit explosions in the sky. Just there's almost like a post-punk vibe. But just a beautiful band, beautiful music, so well produced, and an epic live show. And every song is like super long and tells an entire story. I love it. It's like goes completely against the grain. So I'm gonna choose "Keep Checking Up on Me" by Chartreuse. But that whole EP is worth a listen.
How did you discover them?
Honestly, I'm trying to work out. It might have been at the bottom of New Music Friday, like a year ago. I go all the way to the bottom because I like how they give like the little indie labels like a tiny little space at the end. Because I'm trying to find like new artists that I'm like, oh, I want to work with you. I'm like interested. And I was just instantly drawn. I think that was the lead single on the EP.
Yeah.
And then I played them on my radio show. I have like a monthly radio show in Liverpool that I've had for years. There's a section that I just save for like new music that no one's heard or that are like up and coming. And I've just been raving about them since.
Wonderful. Well, we're steaming into 2022. We're nearly at the halfway mark now. So, looking ahead, tell me what you're looking forward to from the rest of this year personally, and tell me what's going to be happening professionally.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm in such a great place. After all of this, we're here and I've handed my album in. It's going to be released with a distribution company, so I have like way more control. I'm just really excited like about the visuals, the whole campaign, but mainly just like the story of the entire record. I think it's my best work yet. So I'm intrigued to see like how the fans like connect with it, and maybe see if there's some new fans that can come as a result of it. But yeah, I guess this year I'll be playing live again, so it feels like I've got my job back.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if people want to keep up to speed with everything that you're up to, where's the best place to follow you?
Probably Instagram at Lapsley with 4 Ys, I think. But yeah, obviously follow me on Spotify because there's going to be a lot of new music coming out.
Wonderful. Well, if you're happy for me to tag you in this when this episode comes out, those that haven't discovered you yet can go find you and get stuck into your music. We also put together a Spotify playlist of all of your song picks today, and we obviously throw some of your tunes on there as well, so people can go and explore all the records that we've spoken about today. It's been an absolute joy talking records with you. Thank you so much for your time today, and yeah, can't wait to hear the new record and come and see you live soon. Thanks loads, mate.
Thanks so much.
Let's just press stop there.